Hello, everyone. We have a super special episode tonight, don't we, Tommy boy?
Yes, we do. This one's going to have some of that dreaded structure, but it's going to be
Dreaded
good.
structure. Yeah, we did a little bit of structure. Maybe I might have to take that back, but that doesn't mean that companies can start having their people come back to the office. They
Well,
can structure a way for them to work at home.
I think so.
This episode, we are doing a countdown for 12 of America's accountability screw ups. Now, there is no particular order, and obviously, we are missing some, but this is a list of 12 people that Tom and I have come up with that we do believe everyone should be made aware of. Judging by the episode title, The Cosby Effect, I do want to thank Bill Cosby for the inspiration of this episode. So, Bill, if you are listening, which I highly doubt you are, thank you for the inspiration. We realized that there are giant flaws in our legal system. You are not on our list, but we're going to start our top 12 off with the prosecutor who allowed you to get out of prison. His name is Bruce Castor. Bruce Castor is the prosecutor who made a deal with Bill Cosby way back when that he would not bring up certain testimony during his criminal trial, which he decided to do, which ultimately got Bill Cosby released, which goes to tell you there is a big problem in the legal system.
It's not even that he wasn't guilty of committing the crimes he committed. It's that there was a technicality in which promise made that wasn't kept, and that's how he got out. So he is a guilty man, but because Bruce Castor decided to make such a deal in the first place and then renege on his own deal, that's something for which he should be held accountable. I mean, there's a guilty man back on the streets literally because he screwed up. That's a failure of him and his job within the legal system.
And it's not Bill Cosby's fault. When you are convicted and you're guilty, no matter what, you're always going to try a way to get out free. So in this case, the dominoes just so happened to fall and land in a way where it was in Bill Cosby's favor, and he is a free man because of this legal technicality or loophole, screw up, whatever you want to call it, and he got free. You can't blame the man himself because of this.
Yeah, it's true. And the other thing you can't do is it's things like this that make the entire legal system look like a joke. And they make the entire legal system in the United States look bad. And it's really not even, the fault of the system as a whole that Cosby walked free. It's the fault of this guy for having forgotten, or I guess deliberately pulling back terms of the agreement that he made.
Or he simply forgot and didn't make notes and decided to bring it up, which goes to show you he's not very organized. I mean, this is a mistake that people need to realize that this attorney screwed up and should be held accountable one way or another, whether it's through his legal profession of hiring him. I mean, Trump hired him for some impeachment stuff, and it's just like he's not that good of an attorney to make this big of a mistake with Bill Cosby unless there was a deal made outside of all of what we know. And it's been so long, so I can make this mistake and you can go free at some point. But obviously we'll never know the domino effect of that, except he made a mistake. There's a technicality and Cosby's now free.
I think he should be disbarred.
I do too, but who's going to do that?
Moving on to number 11. We have Matthew Broderick. Now, Matthew Broderick is obviously a household name at this point, Ferris Bueller. He's a widely known actor. But in 1987 in Ireland, he crashed into two women and killed them. What he ended up having to do as far as restitution is he had to pay a $175 fine. The details of this case are kind of murky, and it seems like the whole thing was sort of deliberately swept under the rug. Matthew Broderick doesn't remember what happened. He crossed into their lane and hit them head on. They weren't doing anything wrong. He was at fault. He was completely at fault. And yet somehow he didn't even get a manslaughter charge like the average person would. He paid a $175 fine and got away with it.
Now, does he come from a family with money, do we know of? Because to get such a slap on the wrist for such a terrible thing to happen is kind of crazy. Now, was he also famous in 1987?
I'm 99% certain he was famous in 1987. I think that might have been, that was the height of his fame, actually, because Ferris Bueller came out in 86. So
that great movie
known.
Got him known. And obviously, at that point, people saw someone that was going to be a Hollywood star. So we might as well figure out a way to brush this under the rug, perhaps.
I'm sure he had enough money to hire a good defense. And I'm sure that somehow somebody used some kind of wily charms to just make it so that he got out scot-free.
So what you're saying is by having the money to pay for a great defense, the more you pay, the better your odds are of getting away with it.
Sure.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Okay. Which in that case brings us to our number 10 when it comes to having money and possibly getting away with a lot of stuff. If you listeners don't know, we did have a housing crisis back in 07, 08. A lot of bad stuff went on during that time, and it cycled into one of the biggest financial crises of our generation. No Wall Street executives or CEOs went to jail for that biggest crisis of our generation, if you could believe it. Now, maybe some small timers went away, some bad loan officers, some bad realtors, but the Wall Street executives and CEOs, no one went to jail, which makes me also think if they didn't go to jail, they must have had a top-notch legal team to show this as something where we should just pay fines, but nobody went to jail. That's pretty crazy, right? You know, you and me, Tom, if we did something where we got a house illegally or sold one house with bad title, we could probably go to jail for it.
No, definitely. And it's a common theme you see in the sort of financial sector, because it was the same thing that happened with Enron. I mean, how many little people got screwed in Enron, and not a single person at the top of Enron ended up going to jail. I mean, it's terrible. But it just goes to show that there are two things that can sort of whitewash any bad situation. And it's having a lot of money, and it's having a lot of fame. In Matthew Broderick's case, it was both, right? In the Wall Street executives case, the amount of money they could throw at a legal team to help mount a defense made it so they just kind of, I'm sure they probably just screwed off to the Virgin Islands or something, and they're never heard from again. And they're probably just living fat.
I do think that eventually we are going to have an episode where we do talk a little bit more about that financial crisis, but I've always actually wanted to tell our listeners about one particular movie that really shows what the aftermath of the housing crisis was like. I know we have The Big Short, which at the end of that movie, nobody got arrested. And to show a little bit of realism, there's a movie called 99 Homes. It's with Andrew Garfield and Michael Shannon. That is the most realistic movie of the aftermath of the housing crisis. The Big Short was basically laymaning. Is laymaning a word? I'm going to make it a word.
Simplifying. Yeah.
Okay. Simplifying The Big Short. And it had a little bit of fun with it. But if you actually want a touch of realism, watch the movie 99 Homes so you can actually see what the aftermath of the housing crisis was really like. And it was a movie that Hollywood kind of didn't show as a wide release, because I think if the real world had an understanding of what people would go through, there would actually be more sympathy for the people who did lose their homes. I feel that a lot of people have the mentality of, well, they were buying homes that they never were able to afford to begin with, but at the same time, they still called it a home. Whether they could afford the home or not, they lived there for years. And when you just find out that you can't live there anymore, or you're getting foreclosed on, it's a big deal. And that movie actually shows you as a viewer the feeling of what it's like to lose a home.
And the other thing that people need to keep in mind is that a lot of these people who had these homes, it's not like they conned their own way into getting it. They went to professionals. They went to loan officers. The loan officers went through banks. I mean, it was a system that was corrupt from the very top. Everybody just kind of relied on the person above them doing their due diligence. They just sort of passed the buck in that direction. When it got all the way to the top, I mean, it wasn't the fault of any individual who owned a house that was outside of their means if they, tried to do it the right way. I don't think.
There were some investors that bought those 4 families in Brooklyn that I remember that were first mortgage defaults. Those people I have no sympathy for, but it's the people that bought primary residences with their family. For the people who bought 4 family properties just to rent them out and make money and never had intentions of paying a mortgage, they were pieces of shit. And there were a lot of that going on. But clearly, if you were allowed to do it, I guess no harm, no foul. But there were people who did take advantage of that system. And I don't feel bad if they lost their home. But these are people who had primary residences, families who were kicked out on the streets. And I think people should have been arrested for something like that. I mean, it was a major fuck up. So people should have been arrested, not just fined heavily, because those fines did not go into the pockets of the people who lost their homes and were out on the street.
And it's, it is a shame that the people that were at the top echelons there who saw all of this happening, who knew what they were doing, and maybe they didn't think that the consequences of it would be as dire as they were, but it's a shame to think that those people were up there and they could see this happening in real time before anybody else could, and they just got away with it. I mean, like that's pretty disheartening. Number 9 was somebody who had a fair amount of publicity and press about him because he was engaged in a noble cause. But what people need to realize is that humans are complicated and that somebody can be involved in a noble cause while also being a piece of shit. And that person was Gandhi. Now, so I actually didn't know as much as I thought I knew about Gandhi. But in the beginning of Gandhi's career, right, he was a lawyer in South Africa. And he apparently, to those who knew him, I mean, they knew that he was actually kind of a racist. And well, not even kind of a racist. He was flat out a racist. He thought that the black people in South Africa were savages and that the white race should be the predominant race in the country. Now, this is stuff he told people that were close to him. He also looked down on the other Indians who were in South Africa, even though he was, a lawyer who kind of specialized in representing them. He thought they were savages as well, and that they were, only a step above his sort of idea of the world and the sort of ladder of people in South Africa, the different types of people in South Africa. So that's just the beginning of his career. But obviously then he becomes an activist and everything else. And, he fights against, the sort of British colonialism and imperialism that was going on, which is a noble cause. Right. So at that point, his personal views get sort of swept under the rug, and he becomes sort of the face of this movement. And he takes on, a sort of larger than life personality as the face of this movement. So, and you could even argue maybe he changed and maybe he didn't hold those kind of views anymore. At that point, anybody who was close to him didn't really divulge anything after that. But one thing we do know is that during that time, he was pretty vocal about his misogyny. And, he apparently thought that women were simultaneously at the whim of men's urges, but also responsible for their own virginity. To move further from that, he would use naked young women to test his own celibacy. Speaking of celibacy, he never even told his wife that he was going to be practicing celibacy. He just announced it one day. He would get naked young women in his bed to lay next to him and test him to see if he would make a move. And a lot of these girls were young. One of them apparently was even his grandniece. So that's pretty disturbing. But here's the worst thing he did, right? So his wife contracted tuberculosis, and in, I guess, what he thought was, display of solidarity with the people of India, he didn't allow her to get penicillin because he didn't want her using Western medicine. He thought that would be kind of a betrayal of his movement was trying to, further in terms of resisting Western influence. And the doctors told him that with penicillin she'd be cured, but he refused to let her have it. And she ended up dying. But later on, he contracted malaria. And what did he do? He used quinine, which is, again, a Western treatment. And he ended up surviving malaria.
So he was a nonviolent activist who turns out at the end of the day was a misogynistic, racist piece of shit.
yeah, basically. And I mean, like, you know, it's always tough with somebody like that who, you know, did his impact on history was greater than the person that he was. So you could still say he had a positive impact on history as a whole by being the face of the movement that happened there. But at the same time, humans are complicated. And when you get down to it and you analyze Mahatma Gandhi as the person, he was kind of a piece of shit. Like, well, not even kind of, he was a piece of shit.
Well, it comes to a thing where you look at case law when you're trying to argue certain things on a current case. Now, are you able to argue Gandhi when you're talking about people who may have been slightly misogynistic or racist 40 years ago? Because you could kind of say, well, Gandhi was kind of a good activist who did cause a lot of change, but then he was also a piece of shit. So it's like, if you're going to call somebody a piece of shit from 20, 30 years ago for being misogynistic or racist, you got to call Gandhi the same thing. And really, his history should be erased too. If you're going to say it about other people. Now, granted, Gandhi's not white, so maybe that might be the problem.
I mean, I think it's, you know, just like it is sometimes possible to separate the art from the artist. I think it is just as possible to separate the legacy of somebody from maybe the terrible things they did that had no effect on that legacy. So with somebody like Gandhi, you know, I think it is entirely possible to argue both sides of it. So I think you could say he was a piece of shit as a person, but ultimately he did good things. Like he did a good, he was a benefactor in the grand scheme of history, but the man himself was a flawed man in several ways. And he was not, as an individual, a very upstanding human being.
I see what you're saying there. And that kind of brings us to what I'm going to bring up in number 8. And I guess we can kind of link the two together. So our number 8 are the celebrities that knew of Harvey Weinstein's not so appropriate activities. Obviously, Harvey Weinstein, he's a piece of shit. And I think he's being held accountable for some of the things that he's done. Maybe not all of them, but some of them. But if we trace back, there are a lot of celebrities that are still making movies today, celebrities who are still getting paid millions of dollars, who knew of Harvey Weinstein's actions and did nothing about it, whether it be now or 10, 20 years ago, throughout the whole time of him doing it. All of those actors and actresses, and Harvey Weinstein did in fact have a big piece in what Hollywood is today, even on the positive side. There were many movies that he was a part of that would not have been made if it wasn't for him. And there's other careers that would not have been made because of him, right? He was a terrible person who did terrible things. He was a misogynist and he did things that are very, very inappropriate. However, other people knew about it and did nothing. It's basically, there's a law where you see someone committing a crime and you turn a blind eye. We're in the wrong if that's happening. Did you know that if we see somebody drowning and you just walk away from it, you're kind of accountable for that? Isn't that one of Phil Collins' songs where he saw somebody drowning and he didn't save them?
Yeah.
In the Air Tonight.
In the Air
right?
Tonight.
So you're kind of at fault if you, I think you're at fault if you are of a emergency type occupation, where if you're a cop and you see somebody drowning and you don't do anything about it, you're held accountable for that. So don't you think all the actors and actresses and directors and everyone that is getting money from Harvey Weinstein, if they saw him do something, they actually had an obligation to do it. And then by them not doing it or saying anything, they should be held accountable as well?
That's a good point. I do think it was something that was known about. And even if it was only rumored to be true, something like that can't go on for as long as it did without some level of just complicity from the people who were around it. And I mean, a lot of these people worked with Harvey Weinstein a lot. So to say that they knew nothing of it is very naive. It's naive to assume that a lot of people who were in the film industry during his sort of reign of terror there had no idea that it was going on. Like there had to be something.
We know when our friends are pieces of shit. And honestly,
Yes.
we've told our friends like, "Hey man, you're a little bit of a piece of shit." People should have had a conversation with Harvey. I mean, like Quentin Tarantino is one of my favorite directors. I love every single movie that he's done. Even that stupid movie 4 Rooms I enjoyed. He even said in an interview that Harvey Weinstein's like a father figure to him. If you mean to tell me he was a father figure like to you, and you're going to deny saying you had no idea what he was doing, then you're straight up lying to everyone. And I feel if Quentin Tarantino did know what Harvey Weinstein did, it's kind of his fault too, and he should be held accountable. It's kind of like a cop seeing somebody drowning and letting them drown and did nothing about it, but the cop was caught on video seeing it. That cop is going to get in a lot of trouble. So why aren't the other celebrities that knew? And listen, there's a long list of celebrities that probably knew what he was doing. So something like this is a huge problem, but they're in the same industry. They're in SAG. So because they're part of the Screen Actors Guild, they should be held to a certain level of morality. And they weren't. They weren't held to that. Why isn't there someone that's a victim going after the people that knew? I think they should be held accountable.
I agree with that. It's a small, ultimately, Hollywood is not a huge circle. It's a small circle. And somebody like Harvey Weinstein, everybody knew him. Everybody worked with him or crossed paths with him at some point. You're not going to tell me that it was not common knowledge in that circle of people. And whoever did know about it had the ability to say something, and they didn't. I mean, it's a good thing that eventually enough of the victims banded together and found solidarity through a shared victimhood that allowed them to step forward and really hold him accountable. And that's a good thing. But it's a shame that it had to get to that point in order for him to actually be held accountable instead of something being done proactively about it.
It's not like anyone would have gotten killed. It would have been one of those things where they're just not getting any parts in Hollywood anymore if they decided to whistleblow on Harvey Weinstein. I mean, I look at my own morality, for instance. If I was a loan officer sitting in a real estate office, and let's just say I'm getting that entire real estate office book of business, and there's one group there that's doing some odd flip scandals, right? And I got word of it. You're damn right that I'm going to be reporting that group because I know what it's like for people to go through something terrible during a crisis. And if people are getting conned into a weird flip, I'm going to report it. But if that means that I'm the whistleblower on that group and I don't get any more business from that real estate office or other realtors that are heard that I did a whistleblow, so be it. I'm fine with that. And if I need to get a new job, I'd have to get a new job. I mean, I feel like if somebody said something sooner, it would have saved other people the embarrassment and harassment Harvey Weinstein caused. Again, the celebrities that knew of it should have been held accountable. There are a lot of them. And I know if people do digging on the internet, they know who it is. And the way to do it is by not supporting their stuff and making a little bit of a bigger deal about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of people who are not made out to be a big deal when they should have been, number 7 on our list here is Albert Einstein. And Albert Einstein's another one who you could argue, well, it's harder, I guess, to argue that Albert Einstein was a benefactor for humanity when he was integral in the development of the atomic bomb. But suffice it to say, he was a great scientist. However, as a person, again, not a very good person. He was also a misogynist. And when it comes to his wife, apparently he had a list of demands that she had to satisfy. And people who were close to them reported that the way they lived together was more like a a housemaster maid arrangement than it was a husband and wife, a loving marriage type thing. Again, it just goes to show that, like, somebody can be capable of great things, maybe related to their legacy, but they can also be capable of being really shitty in day to day on like a personal level.
And where did we find out all of this from? Didn't he have a diary that he actually wrote?
Yes, he had a diary he wrote that was in his diary. They found out. So in reading his diary, they discovered that was how he treated his wife.
That is crazy. So he hand wrote it, which goes to tell you, everyone, we're looking up tweets from 5-10 years ago and going to interviews that happened 10, 20 years ago, what people say. Obviously, you can't deny what's written in somebody's diary. So if we're holding those people accountable for what they said in a tweet or what they said in an interview years ago during certain times, you have to hold Albert Einstein accountable as well for being a misogynistic piece of garbage to his probably lovely, nice wife.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, if you handwrite something, I mean, that's even worse than tweeting something, I think. If you handwrite something, like, you have to think about it. It takes time to, like, really handwrite something, and to have it all written there. It's a lot harder to defend having handwrote something in the heat of the moment than it is to, like, have quickly typed something.
I agree with that. That's why I think some tweets are accidental. I've sent angry text messages. I think we covered this on one of our past episodes too, where we write something in anger via text, like your fingers move faster than your brain actually comprehends. And think about it. He was probably using that fucking pen where you got to dip it in the ink.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he probably was.
So, like, he really thought about it.
Yeah.
My wife better make me fucking dinner tonight, and it better be hot.
Yeah, he had to dip his quill tip pen in ink, and his thought had to last at least that long for him to get it on the paper. And that's not to mention, like, he had to write each letter. I mean, like, I bet that took some time. That was plenty of time for him to be like, should I put this into writing?
I'll tell you, if we go to our number 6, Jordan Belfort would have had a really easy time selling him a new pen.
Yeah, that's true.
Everyone, obviously, the past couple episodes, obviously he was going to be on this list. Number 6 is Jordan Belfort. Giant piece of shit, criminal con man. He was not held accountable, I don't think, in the least, because 4-year sentence, down to 22 months, stole over $200 million, only paid $10 million of it back to small-time investors. Small-time investors are people like you and me. Anyone listening to this show, you're a small-time investor. If your net worth is under $1 million, I consider you a small-time investor. Even if your net worth is $2 million, you own a couple of assets on top of what you have in your retirement. He stole from people like you and me. And now he is praised to be a motivational speaker because he can sell people his bullshit. So he has a cult. He's not a motivational speaker. He's a cult man who sold all the assholes who were putting money in his pocket a scheme of robbing people is okay. And you sell no matter what and at no matter what cost it is. And most of the time it's your dignity. So he's telling you to sell your dignity.
Right.
He needs to be canceled. He's just somebody through the loophole who found this mentality of, I can make money off the person who's striving to make money. Everyone, if you need a motivational speaker, I'm not going to tell you that's a bad thing, but you can do it. You can do it yourself. You don't need the help of those people. It's all about the follow-up and the confidence, and you have it. You don't have to pay me $300 for a 3-day seminar to tell you. You need to have a little bit of confidence. You need to believe in yourself, and you can fucking do it.
There you go.
Yeah.
You should be the antithesis to Jordan Belfort, Chris.
Oh no.
You should go out there and motivate people.
Yeah. I don't think I'm a good motivator. There'll be a lot of like, oh fuck. Imagine me in a room with like 100 people listening to me. I'm just gonna be like, up and back, side to side. I'd be so nervous.
Yeah.
Literally would just be like, it's you guys. Like, you got to follow up. It's easy to motivate people. You don't need to, I don't know,
I think there's also a fair amount that goes into like when you pay for something like that, you tend to there like a thing in your brain that happens when you put money down to see somebody like that. And then you go there. I feel like your brain is going to tell you you're getting more out of it than you might actually be.
Yeah, because you go to one of those things, it's a jump start, I guess. But maybe what needs to happen is somebody just needs to create something where I get it's like you're paying to see the person there, I guess. I mean, again, I don't want to bad talk. Some people do need it. Listen, some people do need it. But I think Jordan Belfort is a con artist. He's a criminal, and he's still conning people. He got away with stealing from people like us. He did what Bernie Madoff did, but on a smaller scale. And Bernie Madoff fucked with millionaires and billionaires, and that's why he got what he got. Yes. Jordan Belfort stole from me. He stole from you. He stole from people like us. That doesn't really matter.
It's true. Yeah. As long as he's got friends in high places, he can get away with it.
And you know, the one thing is, like, if you look at all of like his pictures and posts like that, like, he's mocking what he did. He's mocking FBI. He's mocking the stuff that he got arrested for. There's an ego there that he doesn't care what he did.
Right. Yeah. If nothing else, his ego survived anything that they threw at him. And that's kind of despicable in its own right.
I don't want to focus much more time on him, but I did think it was necessary to add him to this list because, listen, everyone, I want you to get your Wolf of Wall Street books, your whatever the hell that sequel of his was. I want you to burn it.
Throw it out.
Burn it. Burn it. Make a video of it. Tag me in it somehow.
There we go. Yeah, tag the Chris and Tom show if you're going to burn your Wolf of Wall Street book. Moving on to another person who was rich and able to evade the consequences of his actions. Number 5, we've got Mr. Wonderful himself, Kevin O'Leary. Kevin O'Leary, another household name. He's on Shark Tank, right? He's Mr. Wonderful. He's known as one of the more critical investors on that show. And he's fun to watch on TV. You know, he's not afraid to tell somebody, hey, your idea sucks and you suck. And it makes it easy to like him, even though he's not ultimately very likable if you actually listen to any of his advice in terms of, you know, how he made it and how he got to where he is and what he thinks of the world in general. It's not very likable once you really start looking into him. But in 2017, he and his wife were at a dinner party in Ontario, right? And after the dinner party, the two of them got in his boat and were headed back to his house. Now, his house was on this lake, the same lake that the party was at. So they're going across the lake, and you could argue that maybe it was the familiarity with the lake that caused this, but his wife was speeding, right? She was driving the boat, and she was speeding. Now, meanwhile, there was another boat that had their lights turned off because they were looking at the stars in that lake. So O'Leary's wife hits that boat and kills 2 of the passengers aboard, and they're gone. Now the cops come. They want to breathalyze O'Leary's wife. She refuses. So she gets some sort of civil fine slapped on her because she refused to do that. And then it ends up going to court. So the families of the deceased filed wrongful death lawsuits against O'Leary, and O'Leary countersued. Now, it's one thing it's one thing, and it's a terrible thing, but it's one thing to kill 2 people in a boat and then just kind of not be immediately arraigned at that point. But I don't know exactly how the laws in Canada work. But then for her to refuse a breathalyzer and for her to not get immediately arrested and held in jail for that. And then on top of all of that, for the family to file wrongful death lawsuits and for O'Leary to countersue. I mean, at this point, he's not even facing a legal penalty for what he did. The families of the deceased are just filing lawsuits against his estate. And for him to countersue, like, I get that some legal team probably advised him to countersue because it made him look less guilty if he did that. But his boat crashed into their boat and killed the people on their boat.
But the boat was invisible, Tom.
Yeah, well, if she had
Invisible in quotes, the boat was invisible. And and on top of that, O'Leary did not know whether or not his wife drank that night. Can I actually call bullshit on something like, listen, you and I, we get trashed together. When we go out, when we're with friends, family, we ask people, do you want a drink? And even though you can be completely whacked, if someone didn't have a drink that night. He came to a party with his wife on a boat, and you're going to tell me you don't know if she had a cocktail?
Yeah.
It's absolutely bullshit.
But maybe that's how much of a schmuck he is. He's like, oh, well, you know what? My wife brings me drinks if I want them. Not the other way around.
Well, obviously if she's a drinker at all and they went to a party on a boat, she definitely had a cocktail. I mean, you're not going to tell me that she didn't have a drink that night. And at the same time, what's also terrible is that if you have money, and I'm assuming this guy has boatloads of money, no pun intended.
Oh, God.
You can sue anyone for anything. So if he did do a countersue, I don't really know much about it, but if he did do a countersue, it's because he has all this money, and what he wants to do is turn it around. He wants to turn the whole case around like, well, we weren't really drunk. It was just an accident. My boat was so big, and that poor family's boat was so small, we couldn't see it. There's so many things that these people could do, and it just goes to show you that the legal system is allowing them to now sue this family. And what if these families don't have any money?
Right. That's the other thing I was going to say. Like, he might just be trying to exhaust the means of their legal defense.
Exactly.
And that's the kind of thing you'd like to think, something like that. You'd like to think a lawyer would take a case like that, maybe not pro bono, but pay afterwards type thing. Because wouldn't want to argue for like a moral cause like that. I don't know.
This is the problem with settlements, though, right? Everything gets brushed under the rug, and then you really don't know the outcome or the truth of what really happens. Listen, the family who had two relatives die, right? The relatives are dead. I know it's a super sad thing to say. They're dead. They're gone, right? Let's just say there was no life insurance. They had no savings. They had no assets. Let's just say these were two people who had a boat. They were traveling. They rented it for the day. They had normal jobs, blah, blah, blah. They're dead. They're gone. It's sad. Very sad. Now they have a family who just lost two people. Let's just say that family, to come up with the funeral costs, because funerals aren't cheap, especially for the common person. It could be upwards of tens of thousands of dollars. So now they're out tens of thousands of dollars figuring out a way to do it. Now they're suing for $3 million. Okay. And then O'Leary comes back. Let's just say he offers them $1 million to settle. And it's like, well, this is $1 million. This is it's the most money that we're ever going to have. What else do we have? What justice are we really going to get? Because what's ultimately going to happen is our attorneys getting paid off the amount of money that we get. Let's just say we can't afford to sue on an hourly basis. So now if we don't take that $1 million, this has to go to trial. Now we have to worry about a jury actually convicting them. And then there's that possibility that the jury actually doesn't say they're guilty and they get nothing. And now they have a giant legal bill because they decided to take the risk to go to trial. Because I'm pretty sure if you decide to say no on a certain settlement and you go to trial and you don't pay that legal, you're going to have to pay a legal bill if you don't win the trial.
Sure. And that seems to me like that was probably their only option, either to get paid off in silence or to get buried under an amount, a monstrous amount of just legal defense on O'Leary's side, because he has the money to be able to, hire a team of lawyers rather than just one. So in times like that, there is no winning decision to make. And you kind of have to rely on the justice system at that point. And you can't.
If you have money, clearly, if we go back to number 12, if you have money, mistakes happen.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You can manipulate it if you have the means to do it.
And the settlement system is really where you can see the flaws in the legal system, because if you have money, things most likely will go your way. I mean, again, there are cases where it doesn't. Look at Bernie Madoff, but there are certain times where, well, again, Bernie Madoff stole from people who make millions and billions. So technically, they all probably came after him. So if you put the money battling each other, probably all the people he stole from have a bigger net worth than him. So they won.
Yeah. But it brings us to an interesting point here, which is I really had to dig. I remember when this story came out, and it's just something that stuck in my head, and I had to dig for details on it because they were not readily available. This is like a couple pages worth of Google results to kind of piece everything together, and then on top of it all, I could find absolutely nothing that stated what the outcome of it was. I don't know if it's still in litigation. I don't know if there was a settlement that was reached that was just, done behind closed doors. There's nothing about it anywhere. And yet I see O'Leary out there in public still. I mean, I want to say 2 weeks ago, he had an interview with that magazine Reason. He had a video interview with the editor-in-chief of Reason magazine about why taxes are bad and how this idea of the gimme youth in the country are destroying America and why it's all problematic and everything else, and how he was a self-made man. And it's like, we're going to have this conversation with him? Like, doesn't he have some skeletons in his closet?
But he probably paid for the interview. I guarantee you it's one of those things where they didn't reach out to him. He probably was like, I need to get on some positive news, talk how I made all this money, because there's still people who get hard off billionaires, or millionaires. And he probably paid for the interview. Dude, that's how they do it. It's the Jordan Belfort effect, man. You can't find a lot on the stuff that he did because he spent so much money on probably the SEO, the search engine optimization, to move all the bad stuff way deep into the web. So
Sure.
that's what these people with money are doing. They are now hiding the stuff that they do and just putting so much positive stuff on themselves on the internet. So what O'Leary's probably doing is he's paying for these interviews. He's probably going to pay for articles because he can afford to pay for positive news.
Right.
I make a mistake, right? Let's just say I write one bad loan. Let's just say, hypothetically, I committed mortgage fraud on one loan. My life is over. Okay.
Yep.
It's all you're going to see on Google is I did this, I did that.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to cost me thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. I don't have, first off, probably to pay the fines. And then on top of that, get that off the first 4 or 5 pages of Google. But that's what's going to be on there, the bad stuff. And so what I'm going to have to do is invest tens of thousands of dollars to fix that. So what these people can do, Jordan Belfort, Matthew Broderick, and Kevin O'Leary, they can afford to get the negative stuff off.
There's firms out there who will do that. And
it's not cheap.
No, it's not. They charge top dollar for that kind of thing, but they could do it, and they can help you with a firm like that and a PR manager who is accustomed to, or who's familiar with working with, I guess, people who have been sort of publicly disgraced. You get a team of experts in there who know how to spin things in a different direction, and that's what it becomes. It becomes a giant spin campaign until you're back in the limelight, you're back in the public's good graces, and everybody you hurt just kind of falls to the back of the room, and their voices get more and more muffled until it's relegated to the last pages of a search engine. That is terrible. That shouldn't be able to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that. I 100% agree with that. Moving on to number 4, which really does hurt me to put this guy on the list. He is a phenomenal actor. However, Christopher Walken is number 4. Not sure how many of you know this, but he was, in fact, on the boat where Natalie Wood happened to fall overboard and pass away. So when you actually Google who killed Natalie Wood, Robert Wagner does show up. However, he's not convicted and he's not proven to have murdered Natalie Wood, but there is a reason to believe that he may, in fact, have killed Natalie Wood. And Christopher Walken was on the boat. Christopher Walken, that awesome actor in all of the movies that we love. True Romance, Seven Psychopaths, The Prophecy. He was on that boat. He's supposedly, I would have to assume if he were on that boat, best friends with Robert Wagner. And when Natalie fell off, he was sleeping.
Right. Sleeping in quotes.
Sleeping. Obviously, he won't talk about it. That's not something he'll ever talk about. But if there's somebody that knows what actually went on, and a lot of people do, unfortunately, think Robert Wagner did it, Christopher Walken probably knows the truth.
I have two things to say about that. The first is that you don't, it's like, what did he wake up in the morning and he came out to the boat and he said hi to Robert Wagner and he was like, wait a minute, wasn't there three of us? And Robert Wagner was like, nope. And he's like, oh, okay. And like, how do you not know that somebody's been, but what I heard was the sort of popular narrative at the time was that Natalie Wood was having an affair with Natalie Wood was married to Robert Wagner, right? I think maybe engaged, but she was supposedly having an affair with Christopher Walken, and he was the reason that they had their fight, which is part of the reason why people suspected that Robert Wagner might have been responsible, allegedly responsible for such a thing. Now, I don't know if that was ever substantiated, but that is something that people were saying was common knowledge at the time among, their circle of friends.
It's a terrible story. It's a sad story. And a lot of people, even Natalie Wood's family, they believe there was foul play on that boat and it was not an accident. And if it was not an accident, there were a lot more people thinking it was, in fact, an accident. Then, Christopher Walken knows something. Robert Wagner, I'm assuming, was again his friend. And Tom, listen, you're my best friend. If we had foul play on a boat and I were sleeping, I would know about it.
Yeah.
It's let's be real for a second. Best friends. Tom and I are best friends. And I'm sure when you're making millions of dollars and you're on a boat, you're even better friends than Tom and I. So we'd be even better friends if we made $1 million and we're just partying on a fucking boat.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I would know if you did something you weren't supposed to do.
Right. Everybody who was on that boat knows what happened, whatever it was.
Or I'm completely wrong putting Christopher Walken on this list, and you do believe it was an accident. And in that case, then I apologize that I did put Christopher Walken on this list, if you do in fact think it was an accident.
Well, I guess that's up to the viewer to decide.
That is. So let's move on.
So this one I just wanted to mention because I feel like this one got very twisted up in the media, mostly because it became a sort of gender issue. And regardless of how you feel about any of that, when you get down to brass tacks, what happened here was wrong. Now, I'm talking, of course, about Cardi B, who back in 2017 in an Instagram post talked about some of the things she had to do to survive before she got famous. And one of the things she had to do, according to her, was invite men back to her hotel room and drug and rob them. Now, I get it, right? These men were probably not, they probably weren't choir boys. They weren't people. And some of them maybe were upstanding citizens who were just, engaging in something that might have been shitty. You don't know. So you can reasonably assume that these men had some lascivious intent. I'm not saying that they're completely off the hook in terms of sort of the morality angle. But at the end of the day, regardless of anybody's intent for going back to that hotel room, Cardi B took advantage of them. She drugged them and she robbed them while they were passed out. And that, regardless of what the circumstances were, that is not okay. That should not just be forgotten. That should not just be accepted as a thing that people had to do. Like she didn't have to do that. That's a terrible thing to do.
Yeah, it's a terrible thing to do. But I guess she was trying to make ends meet, and it's okay because it was 2017 and she was just a woman trying to make it, man.
See, and that's where my problem with it is, right? Everybody's trying to make it, and it's easy to understand sort of the idea of a power dynamic there, where it's these men who maybe had the capability of overpowering her, and maybe she was scared in those situations. Okay, I suppose, but to just straight up drug somebody and rob them is not okay. I don't care what, unless I don't know, unless it was. I mean, I don't know, unless it was Jeff Bezos, I guess then maybe it would be okay.
I mean, listen, I think what she should do is make a parody of WAP and call it DAR, DAR, drug and rob. That's my job. Well, she does go on the list because nobody actually cared. And the fact that she admitted to it kind of
freely
makes it like, yeah, she
really admitted to it, like unprompted.
Yeah,
like volunteered this information.
It's just like, yeah, she admitted to it, so she should have. It should have been done.
Part of the problem with this whole thing with Cardi B was that she just had no remorse about it, right? And she doubled down on it when she was confronted about having done such a shitty thing. So, people were like, "Hey, it's kind of fucked up that you robbed and drugged people." And she was like, "Listen, I'm from the streets, and I thought I was in an environment where like we could talk about real shit, and I wasn't glorifying this behavior, but I did what I had to do." And it's like, okay, so you're not outright glorifying it, and that's good, but you're also not really condemning it either. Like you're not saying that it was a bad thing to do and you apologize or anything like that. You're just saying like, "Oh yeah, I did what I had to do. And that's it." It's like, well, that's kind of that's kind of a cop out, I think, to just say, "Oh, well, I had to do it to get here." Like, yeah, but you like that's a shitty thing to do, and you should feel bad about it. You shouldn't just say that you're not glorifying it. You should say, "Yeah, and this was a really bad thing I did, and I apologize for it."
It's because she's successful now, and she's successful for being, I mean, I guess a bad bitch. It's one of those things where why would she apologize for it? If she apologized for it, I actually think it would have been worse for her to have had apologized for it. Because if she apologized for it, it's one of those things where the media would have taken it as apologetic Cardi B doing all these things, and it would have been turned differently. I mean, maybe it's the media's fault. I'm sure it's her agent that's just like, go with it. Your following doesn't give a shit, so go with it.
Yeah, I suppose that could probably be it, because you know what? If she were apologetic about it, it would mean that that would imply some admission of wrongdoing, and maybe by doubling down, she was just able to get by because it didn't appear, I guess, in the sort of media frenzy that was around it for a while, that she had any remorse for it, and therefore that she had done anything wrong. So I could see it from that angle, I suppose, as a PR thing. Maybe that was a damage control measure where it was,
what was the damage control measure, Tom? I actually think WAP is the damage control to that, because that got so much coverage for being one of the most profane songs ever that got everyone's mind off of anything else. It's just like Cardi B WAP. You don't even think Cardi B drugged and robbed. Yeah. She came out with that song that was so shocking, right? People were shocked. It's just like, God, it's a song. Who really cares? But the way it was publicized was that it was a shock value of whatever year that came out, and you just forgot everything else.
Part of it also was it was sort of heralded as like being that rap is kind of a hyper sexualized genre as it is, and it's been largely dominated by men. The idea behind WAP was that it was women reclaiming their sexuality within the hip hop space, and I understand that. I'm totally for that message, but yeah, there's an ugly thing that Cardi B did.
Cardi B's on the list just because she got no accountability for that. And if it were a man, holy fucking shit, it would have been game over.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if anything about that situation were different, there would have been an entirely different outcome of that. I mean, look at the person who kicked off the list, fucking Bill Cosby. I mean, that was kind of his MO too, wasn't it? But
listen, Bill Cosby just got lucky. Bill Cosby got lucky because of a legal fuck up. That's it. Bill Cosby would have been in jail if this mistake didn't happen, which goes to just show you that there's something wrong with the legal system, that deals from years ago can screw up actual cases now. Bill Cosby should still be in jail, but he's not. And it's because legal technicalities.
Moving on, for number 2, we have Rob Lowe. So Rob Lowe, you probably know him from Parks and Rec. You might also know him from The West Wing, if you're a little older. You know, character actor, good actor, right? He's been around for a while. Most people know of him at this point. But he, back in 1988, was not an actor, or not just an actor, I should say. He was part of a team working for the Democratic Party, right? And he was campaigning for Michael Dukakis. Okay, so back in 1988, Rob Lowe wasn't an actor, or wasn't just an actor. He was an actor. Okay, let's start that the fuck over again. God damn it. Here, hang on. Which is funny because this whole thing made Rob Lowe stop drinking, but it's making me drink more. Oh, God. Okay, so let's pour the beer. Back in 1988, Rob Lowe was fairly popular. He was part of the Brat Pack with that chick from 16 Candles, like Judge Reinhold and Emilio Estevez and all those guys, right? So he was part of a circle in Hollywood that was very popular. And he was campaigning in Atlanta for the Democratic Party's frontrunner, Michael Dukakis, Democratic National Convention during that time. And there was a big party that they had. So during that party, he was videotaped dancing with a girl. And then he later took that girl back to a hotel room and videotaped himself engaging in sexual activity with her. And then later, it came out that she was underage. And so this became a huge scandal, right? This became a big deal because he was a known actor at this point. So it was a big thing. You know, his feet were really held to the fire for this, and he was in a lot of trouble. His public image was in a lot of trouble. So what he decides to do at that point, he comes out, and he comes out totally admitting his guilt. He says, this was wrong. This was the wrong thing for me to do. And I was drunk, and maybe I have an alcohol problem. So now I'm going to get sober, right? Very good. So good for him. He gets sober, turns his life around, and everything after that is supposedly good. Then he's in The West Wing, then he's in Parks and Rec, everything's fine. But in what wasn't super talked about was in 2008, he had 3 different nannies come forward with complaints about how much of a piece of shit he was, in terms of he overworked them, he stiffed them on pay, and also he sexually harassed them. Now, Rob Lowe, of course, denied all of that and said that they were just trying to extort him. Given his track record, given what he was involved in at one point, it at very least should give you pause that maybe he's still up to his old tricks. Maybe he's not the wholesome actor that everybody thinks he is. Maybe he is involved in some shitty things behind the scenes, because it's not just one, but 3 different nannies of his that came forward and said this. So
and he's using alcohol as a scapegoat and drugs as a scapegoat. Oh, sure. I found myself now. I'm going to become sober because he got caught. If he didn't get caught, then I'd like to see if he got sober. Honestly, if he got caught, so he had to come up with some story like, oh my God, I have a drug and I have an alcohol problem. So let me take care of this now because he got caught. If he didn't get caught, then I wonder what the outcome would have been. And he also made a tape. Okay. Like, can we just be real for a second? He made 2 sex tapes. And the other one was him, another guy and a girl.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's true. That also happened.
And since he was the first Hollywood scandal, there's an interview where he goes, I didn't make money off of it. I should have cashed in on it. So the fact that he has the mentality of he should have made money off of it goes to tell you that he probably didn't care. He just got caught.
Right. And I mean, his argument at the time, which is fair enough, was that he didn't realize the girl was underage because she was at a nightclub. So he assumed everybody at the nightclub was of age, and that's fine, But here's the thing. When you're a prominent celebrity like that, don't be afraid to ask a girl for her ID, because if you're a celebrity and somebody wants to sleep with you, if you ask them for their ID, I don't think they're going to say, ew, fuck you, and walk away. And if they do, it's probably a good thing that you asked, because that's kind of a red flag.
Yeah, when you're 24 years old, you know what someone under the age of 21 looks like.
Right.
It is a maturity thing there, and 16 years old is an age where you know if someone's 16 years old. I don't want to hear that I really had no idea. I thought she was 18. If you thought she was 18, you're still actually a little bit of a fucking scumbag, because you're 24 years old, you're an actor, and you're at a Democratic National Convention. So unless she was 21, you thought she was 21, but she's 16, you still have a 5-year difference. So I still think either way, even if she was 18, he's a little bit of a scumbag.
Right. And I mean, I could see the argument for maybe some people can, some people look different, some people age different, whatever. Maybe some people are able to present themselves, but like, just ask. Ask somebody for their ID. Ask somebody for proof that they are as old as they are, especially if you're going to videotape it. I mean, for Christ's sake, if you're going to include somebody on a tape, like maybe, it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter if they just consent to the tape. Also, ask them for like some proof of who they are before you film yourself with them. I mean, especially when you're campaigning for a government official. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer.
His credibility when he says he should have made money on it. As soon as you thought about making money on it, it's just like, you know what? You're just a piece of shit. Whatever you said, we're going sober, blah, blah, blah. Like, that was just the scapegoat of getting caught. And the fact that years later, you're like, I should have made money. You're making jokes about it. Goes to tell you really didn't care. It's part of your past. And you know what? Again, people are getting reamed for shit they say 10, 20 years ago, or tweets that they say 10 years ago. So this is something that, remember, at the back of your mind, everyone, Rob Lowe, kind of a shitty person. And
yeah,
he's in everything still. He's all over the place. You go to his IMDb page, he's had shot after shot after shot. He doesn't get movies, but he gets TV shows.
Sure. He gets TV shows and he gets commercials, and he's not just a feel-good story of somebody turning themselves around like a Robert Downey Jr. is, somebody who you can kind of root for on a wholesome level, somebody who had sort of a sordid past and changed for the better, because you've got these women in 2008 who came out 20 years after he supposedly turned himself around, and should at least call into question whether or not he really did actually take the steps to improve himself.
This will now bring us to our number one. And I'm actually going to read an article rather than kind of talk about it, because it is a little bit of a topic that I don't want to give an opinion on. I'm just going to read it. And it's a reminder of this individual. The rapist name is Robert H. Richards IV. It was an article by All That's Interesting, published on February 9th, 2016. It was updated on January 3rd, 2019. And it goes as follows. Despite the fact that he wasn't technically acquitted, there may be no famous acquittals as infuriating as the one involving Robert H. Richards IV. In 2009, Richards, not a celebrity, but an exceedingly wealthy heir to the massive DuPont family fortune, was convicted of repeatedly raping his own daughter when she was a toddler. Despite her father's warnings not to tell anyone about the abuse, she confessed to her grandmother when she was 5. She was taken to her pediatrician where she detailed the assaults. Richards was arrested. Richards initially denied the charges, but upon failing a polygraph that he had volunteered to take, he changed his plea to guilty. That should have landed Richard in jail for many years. My personal opinion, just taken out back and shot back in the head. But instead, Richard's high-priced lawyers were able to reduce the charges to a 4th-degree rape plea, usually associated with statutory rape cases, and mere 8 years in prison. But that wasn't the end of it. At that instance of Richard's lawyers, the court found that he would not fare well in prison and suspended the sentence. Richard served no time and was instead placed on probation, forced to register as a sex offender, and ordered to pay $4,395 to the Delaware Violent Crimes Compensation Board. For reference, the DuPont family is worth $14.5 billion, and Richard's house alone cost $1.8 million. To add insult to injury, none of this was discovered until 2014 when Richards' ex-wife Tracy filed a civil suit against him, and earlier court documents came to light. The reason for the civil suit, she and apparently even the probation officer suspected Richards of also raping his 19-month-old son. This again goes to show you this family's worth billions, and this sick fuck never served a day in jail.
And I mean, if you Google a picture of him, he looks like an inbred monster. A legal team probably just had the jury look at him and say, look at this guy. He does this guy even look like he's capable of forming sentences? But the fact of the matter is, he's a wealthy person who served no punishment whatsoever for what he did. And what he did was beyond despicable.
And nothing was done.
With enough money and enough of a legal team to bury everything. I mean, even something as cut and dry, this case was, it was doomed from the start. And also, I think his wife should be held somewhat accountable too, because not even somewhat accountable. I mean, she must have known this was happening. So if she was the one who filed the civil suit and she knew it was happening to the daughter, what the fuck? Why isn't she also being held accountable? Because she was a whistleblower on it after having sat with that information mulling around in her head for how many years?
You're absolutely right when it comes to other people being held accountable for things that they know. Goes back to the whole Harvey Weinstein piece where celebrities knew and they knew nothing. So where does it begin? Where does it start? Who should be held accountable when you know other things? Unless she really didn't know. But, I mean, shame on her for sleeping with him in the first place. I don't know. I was probably for the money.
Yeah, it had to be. It had to be. Like I said, you look at this guy, he looks like his entire body formed around his jaw. He looks like he's the product of centuries of brother, sister, and cousin relationships.
So, listeners, we hate to leave you on a little bit of a low note and a sad note, but the last guy is someone who really deserved punishment for what he did and did not get it. And if you really look at it, it's probably because of the amount of money that was spent. And this list all comes down to, minus the Gandhi and Einstein, everything comes down to money.
Yeah, money and fame. Money and fame are the two things that are able to whitewash somebody's history, and it can absolve them of even the most despicable acts.
And we can bitch and complain about it, but the one thing we can do, that if justice isn't served, the one thing you can do to really punish these people is with their pocket. Yep. So when Bill Cosby has his comedy show, don't pay for a ticket. Don't watch it. Don't go to any of his streaming channels. Don't go to any of Jordan Belfort's events. Don't buy his book. Burn his books. Don't listen to Cardi B on Spotify. Don't watch any of Rob Lowe's pilots. Matthew Broderick kind of just sucks now, so you don't have to. He kind of canceled himself, I guess.
Yeah, his punishment was marrying Sarah Jessica Parker.
Yeah. Christopher Walken's old. I mean, I doubt he's doing anything else, but that's a sad one for me. I enjoy all of his movies, but if something did happen on that boat, he is one person that knows what happened.
Yeah.
And then all of the celebrities that knew what Harvey Weinstein did, they're never going to be tried for it, but you can look up who knew and stop supporting them. Because the way that these celebrities and the way that these famous and rich people can get punished is by not putting any more money in their pocket.
Right. Yeah. Don't go to see their movie. Don't go to, don't watch their TV shows.
And just for that, you know what I'm going to do? Even though I like Quentin Tarantino movies, I'm going to make sure I get an illegal download next time.
I don't think you can admit that. That's a joke for legal purposes.
That's a joke for legal purposes. Yes, I would not do that because watch, he fucking sues me. The punishment, $100,000 and pictures of my feet. Well, listeners, we want to thank you so much for listening to our very first countdown. If we missed anyone, shoot us a tweet. Let us know who we missed, and we could have a follow-up episode on this one. We could do our listeners' countdown of America's failed accountability.
Yeah, definitely. We could have a fan inspired list here, and me and Chris will do all the homework on it and make it into a proper list, just like this one was. If that is something that if there is a celebrity that we missed that did something that really irks you, and you feel like you maybe are the only person who really seems to remember what they did, definitely let us know.
Have a good week, and we will see you next week with a brand new interview with a special friend of ours from back in the day.
Way back. Have a good week, and don't be shitty.
Yeah, don't be shitty. Bye.
Bye.